Hello everyone, welcome to my home kitchen. We are going to start on our pie making journey today, and I'm going to show you how to mix up the flaky pastry for your pie doughs. I'm going to be using the proportions that are in my PDF recipes or recipe for the flaky pastry, and that you can find by going to our website, coilsbakeshop.com, and clicking on the Thanksgiving tab, and then you'll be able to purchase the PDF, which has the recipe, proportions, instructions for this flaky pastry, as well as instructions for blind baking and the recipes for our winter luxury pumpkin pie and our pecan pie with chocolate and bourbon. So let's get started making our flaky pastry. So I've set up with our all-purpose flour, salt, sugar, and then unsalted butter that's cold and cubed in about 1/2-inch pieces. I'm going to start by using a pastry cutter. This is my favorite one, but you can use any manner of pastry cutters. They're just sometimes not quite as sturdy. You can even use 2 butter knives. That's the old trick. But this is what we're going to use today. And I'm going to cut all of this butter into my flour mixture. And what that means is we want to get this butter into smaller pieces. We want it to be about pea size as an average, but obviously there's going to be some larger pieces and smaller pieces. And we're going to use a tool like this or a food processor or butter knives instead of our hands, just because there's a high proportion of butter in a dough like this, and we want to make sure that we get it all cut in before it warms up too much. So we're going to start cutting this in. And when I cut in that butter, I'm just kind of rotating my bowl as I go along, and I'm trying to kind of press to the bottom of the bowl so that I'm getting through all of those pieces of butter. What happens if you don't press until you sort of feel the bottom is you just kind of mash a bunch of butter up onto the pastry cutter. So I just keep going like this, and then once it feels like I've got a good amount that's kind of stuck in there, I'll stop and just by hand kind of take this all out. Okay, we're going to pause for a moment and take a look at this. We're getting there, but I still am seeing some kind of larger pieces, like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it with the pastry cutter just a little bit longer, and then if I still have a handful of pieces but not a lot, then I'll actually go and just break up any remaining large chunks with my hands. Okay, this looks good. So this often is sort of surprising to people. I think sometimes like the size of these chunks feels pretty big. And what we're looking for is sort of a pea size average. And that can be some bigger pieces and some smaller pieces. There's always going to be some bigger and smaller. And what we want to do as we're kind of going through and mashing up, that's the word I was looking for, any of these bigger chunks, is we just want to make sure that we don't have any pieces that are so big that they're going to form a hole in the baked good. And so that's anything that's like, yay big. Okay, that's looking good. So I'm going to stop here. My butter is starting to feel just a little more pliable, but it's still very cool to the touch, and it's still in distinct pieces. So it's a good temperature to add my water. If your butter is getting warm at this stage, or you feel like it's melting into the dough, you can go ahead and pause and put your dough in the fridge. Okay, here we go again. So we're gonna add our water now. If you're using a food processor, you're gonna go to the same consistency with, or same size of pieces with the butter, but please don't add your water to the food processor. Go ahead and dump all of these ingredients back into a bowl and then add your water by hand, even if you're cutting the butter in with a food processor. The food processor is great for efficiently and quickly cutting that butter in, but it will overwork your dough, and it's also really hard to get kind of feedback about how well hydrated the dough is if you're adding water in the food processor. So I've got ice water, and we're just using ice water to keep our dough as cold as possible through the process. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by just drizzling about 4 tablespoons in around the top of the dough. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add that all kind of around so that I don't need to do a lot of work to distribute it. And then I'm gonna do this sort of tossing motion, where I'm not developing the gluten, but I'm doing this tossing motion to distribute that water. And I'm gently squeezing portions of the dough together. Once I've done that, I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more water. Make sure you don't add those ice cubes. Drizzle it around. And then we're tossing that and gently squeezing it together once we've dispersed that water. Now, adding water correctly to the dough is probably, just as crucial as cutting that butter in to the right size, because adding not enough water means that you have a dry dough that cracks and also that you tend to overwork in order to get it to come together. But adding too much water can give you sort of a floppy dough where there's too much gluten development. And so you'll notice, like when you go to roll the dough, that it might roll and then spring back. So we really want to find that happy medium. So what I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull any pieces of dough that are already properly hydrated to the side of the bowl or even out of the bowl, so that I'm not adding any extra liquid to a portion of the dough that doesn't need it. Okay, again, I'm just going to drizzle this section here and toss that together and start to apply just a little bit more pressure. And this is what we are looking for. A dough that hangs together nicely when pressed, but that isn't super homogeneous. It doesn't feel wet. It just hangs together nicely. Okay, I'm gonna pull all these pieces out and start just taking them out. And then just add water to this section here of the dough. Okay, there we go. Got plenty of water in there now. Taking the extra dough off my fingers if I can. Take all this dough out. Okay, so I find that the easiest way to divide your dough without overworking it is to actually sort of push it together and set kind of a log, like so. That way I'm able to kind of look over the top of it and pretty evenly divide it in half. You're welcome to also weigh it at this stage, but I generally find this is kind of accurate enough. And what I'm going to do next is just show you how I prep my dough for the next step, which is going to be to rolling it into a circle. So what I want to do is kind of set myself up for success by getting this into a nice disc that's easy to roll out later. So what I like to do is just grab a little bit of flour and gently form that into a ball. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the heel of my hand on the side to keep that sort of from cracking, and then the other heel of the other hand to press down, and I'm just going to rotate like so. And if I get any cracks in the dough, I'm just going to repair those as I go and press this down. And then I'm gonna wrap this in plastic. I save all my plastic bags and wash them out. So that's why this is in a tortilla bag. But then once I've got this in plastic, I can go ahead and smooth those edges even further. And this is about a 6-inch disc. So what I will do at this stage is pop this in the fridge and let it rest for at least an hour or overnight before I roll it out, or put it in the freezer. If I were putting it in the freezer, I would wrap it more securely than this. And if it's in the freezer, it can last for quite a while, up to 2 months before we roll it out. Okay, I think that's it for today. In the next video, we're gonna roll this out into beautiful pie shells. Thank you, Cecilia, for filming. I appreciate it. And I hope this was helpful. Okay, see you soon. Thank you.